Hey guys, today I'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate map based on the latest polls conducted by the Trafalgar Group. So the Trafalgar Group is a Republican internal pollster, and they're known for basically skewing results in favor of the GOP in every single race that they poll. I mean, just look at the Senate runoff polls from 2020. You also have polls for the 2020 presidential election, and basically every single one of their polls overestimated Donald Trump and underestimated Joe Biden or whoever the Democratic candidate in a certain race was. But they do have an A- rating. They've done a lot of polls over the last couple of years, and they do have an okay track record of calling races correctly, mainly because most Democratic pollsters seem to overestimate the Democrats more than Trafalgar overestimates Republicans. But when we look at this map based on their latest polling, you'll see that it will be really very difficult for Republicans to take back the Senate majority, as even their own pollsters are showing them barely ahead in some of the most competitive races of the year. And so here are the actual polls that they have released this year, basically from every single competitive Senate election on the ballot this November. Now we have polls from 11 states, yes, including the state of Vermont, which has a pretty interesting poll that we'll go over in just a bit, but they don't have polls from Missouri or Florida. There was a poll from Missouri all the way back in March, but that's just way too old for us to look at. But in Florida, they have not conducted any polling this cycle, nor have they in Iowa or Utah, but the polls that they have done basically encompass most of the important Senate races, and that's what we're going to look at today. Starting off with New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan leads by 3 points over Dawn Bolduc. This is according to Trafalgar's latest poll, and this poll was only conducted just a little bit over a week ago, so this is their most recent poll to date, and Maggie Hassan is in a very good position now to win re-election. Even Trafalgar has her up by 3 points. She's probably going to win by over 538, currently gives her an 84% chance at winning this race. Her odds have not always been so high. I mean, the race was pretty close at one point, with Hassan only having a 71% chance at winning re-election, but at this point in time, Maggie Hassan is on track to winning her second term in office. The average of all the polls shows Hassan up by 8 points, and this Trafalgar poll is the poll that favors Dawn Bolduc the most out of any poll that's been released for this race over the last 2 months since the Republican primary occurred. And so when Dawn Bolduc was selected, the odds immediately shot up for Maggie Hassan because Dawn Bolduc simply is not a strong nominee for this race. Maggie Hassan might have won by just 0.1% 6 years ago. This was the closest Senate election of the cycle, but that was against the Republican incumbent at the time, Kelly Ayotte. And so this time, this race is going to be different. Maggie Hassan is going to have a much smoother path to victory, and the betting odds currently give her an 82% chance at winning a second term, so even higher odds for her according to the betting markets. And so New Hampshire is going to be likely on most accounts, but according to the Trafalgar Group, as of course being a Republican pollster, they have it as a lean Democratic race, and for this video, that is what we're going to go off of. Next up, in Colorado, Michael Bennet leads over Joe Dea by 6 points according to Trafalgar's latest poll. This poll was also conducted very recently, just 2 weeks ago, and Michael Bennet is also on track to winning re-election just like Maggie Hassan, and honestly, he's probably going to win by a larger margin than his Democratic counterpart in the Northeast. So the average of all the polls in Colorado show Bennet up by 9.3%, so this poll is still slightly an outlier, but not as much as the New Hampshire poll was, and now most new polls have Michael Bennet ahead by double digits, so he's really in a very strong position. He is now running for his third term, and in 2016, he won his second full term in Congress by 6 points against Darrell Glenn. At the same time, Hillary Clinton only carried Colorado by 4.9% on the presidential level, so if Michael Bennet can outperform Biden's results in 2022, he would win by almost a solid margin. I don't think that's actually going to happen. I think that Michael Bennet will slightly underperform the president in his last presidential election, but still, Michael Bennet is going to win relatively easily. 538 gives him a 92% chance at winning this election, so it's almost even a solid Democratic state, and the odds for Bennet have not always been as high as it is right now. At one point, he only had an 85% chance of winning. Going from 85 to 92 statistically is a pretty big deal. deal because 92 basically seals it in for Michael Bennet. The betting markets also favor him pretty significantly, giving him an 87% chance at winning this election. So Colorado is going to be a likely to maybe even solid Democratic state, but it's definitely a race that Republicans are not going to win, with Michael Bennet now ahead in the polls by almost a double-digit margin, and even the Trafalgar Group has Bennet up by 6 points, making Colorado a likely race. And now moving on to Washington, Patty Murray is only ahead by 2 points against Tiffany Smiley, and I think this poll is going to prove to be very, very inaccurate. Patty Murray already won a majority of the votes in the open primary, which means that if every single voter that voted for somebody other than Patty Murray in that primary voted for Tiffany Smiley in November, Patty Murray would still win her re-election by a likely margin. I mean, she may not win by a solid margin. In 2016, she defeated Chris Vance by 18 points, making Washington a solid Democratic state. That's probably not going to happen this time around, but in the aggregate of all the polls, Patty Murray leads by a significantly larger margin of 9.6% over her Republican challenger. The Trafalgar poll is definitely the outlier, and they did have an older poll that had Murray up by 3, so if you're going to average that out, it's still going to be 2.5%, making it only a lean Democratic state according to Trafalgar's poll. But Washington is really not going to be as competitive as they say it's going to be. I mean, look at the betting markets. Patty Murray has a 91% chance at winning re-election, and then according to the 530 forecast, she has a solid 97% chance at winning. The Trafalgar Group is going to be absolutely wrong in this race. Patty Murray is going to win maybe even by double digits. A single-digit margin is still possible, but no matter what, it's going to be a victory by over 5 points. But I mean, based on this map, we're just going to have to put it as a lean Democratic state, with it being less solid for the Democratic Party than even Colorado. In the state of Wisconsin, we have one of the most competitive races of the year. This is the election between Ron Johnson and Mandela Barnes, and this poll is not exactly the best news for the GOP just by itself. If a Trafalgar Group poll has a Republican ahead by 1 or 2%, there's a very good chance that the Democratic candidate will actually end up on top. In fact, that's what happened in many races during the 2020 cycle. Trafalgar consistently had Donald Trump leading in the competitive races like Michigan and Pennsylvania, Wisconsin by 2 to 3% that Joe Biden would end up winning, but also by pretty small margins. So in the Wisconsin poll here, Ron Johnson leads by just 2 points at 49% of the electorate as he seeks a third term in office, but the average has him up by a pretty similar margin, 1.9%. And so the reason why Johnson's numbers are so high now is because the other polls that have shown him ahead by larger margins. I think the Trafalgar Group might actually underestimate Ron Johnson in this case, because all the other polls are showing an upward trajectory for the Republican incumbent. Mandela Barnes was in the lead at the very beginning, but now he has lost that momentum, and Ron Johnson seems like he is on track to winning his third full term, despite after winning in 2016, promising that he would not run again. But since being pressured by Donald Trump and others in the GOP establishment, Ron Johnson changed his mind and reluctantly started a new campaign in 2022. And so in 2016, he did win by 3.4%, despite all the polls showing that he was actually going to lose re-election to Russ Feingold. And so this makes Ron Johnson a candidate that's been able to prove that he can win despite being behind according to the data. And so 538 now favors him as the incumbent here with a 66% chance at winning re-election. The betting markets also heavily favor Johnson, giving him a 77% chance at winning for a third time. And so this will make Wisconsin a lean Republican state according to Trafalgar, but honestly, I would not be surprised if he won by over 5 points. That's simply the national environment that we are in at this point in time. Now, in Nevada, Adam McStald leads by 4 points according to the Trafalgar Group, and this is a race that's seriously trending more and more in favor of the Republican Party as Democrats are losing their grip on the Silver State. They have not done well in Nevada in the last couple of presidential elections, even though they've won in the last 4. The margins were only 2 points for both Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. And so Adam McStald, who is the failed 2018 gubernatorial candidate for the GOP, is now looking like he may become the next U.S. Senator from the state of Nevada. In fact, for the very first time since late May, Laxalt has retaken the lead and is now the favorite according to the polls against Catherine Cortez Masto. Just look at this whole list of polls that showed Laxalt in the lead, many of them from A and B rated pollsters. I think this is really very significant, but no matter what, it's still going to be a very close election. Catherine Cortez Masto is still very much in the race as the incumbent senator, but right now things just aren't looking up for her. Her numbers have been going down over the last couple of months. 538 only gives her a 51% chance of winning, so basically it's a tie here. Both parties have a very good shot at winning this election, but right now I personally favor the GOP just a little bit more. And if you look at the odds here, Masto at one point had a 63% chance at winning. Now it's basically an even tie. The betting markets, though, favor Laxalt by quite a bit, giving him a 63% chance at winning this election. His odds are also higher than they've ever been over the last couple of months. In fact, Catherine Cortez Masto had a 56% chance at winning this race according to the markets at one point in time. She was ahead for most of the months of August and September, but as the month of September came to an end, new polls showed Laxalt leading, and that's why his odds are now higher than they have ever been. So Nevada, according to Trafalgar's poll, is going to be a lean Republican state, but I think that this race can still go both ways, but definitely Republicans are surging in this election compared to many of the other races in which they're seemingly losing support very, very quickly. Next up, in the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, we really have a race to watch here between John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz. This poll shows Fetterman ahead by 2 points, even though the average of all the polls has Fetterman ahead by 6.6. Now, I've always been confident in the fact that John Fetterman is going to win this election. Mehmet Oz is a terrible candidate for the GOP, and I never believed that John Fetterman was going to win by over 5 points, but I've always said that he's probably going to win by a lean margin, and things are really turning out that way. John Fetterman's lead in the polls is starting to shrink just a tiny bit, but that was always expected. Fetterman was never going to win by a double-digit margin. This is Pennsylvania in the year 2022. Democrats simply aren't going to do that well in a race as competitive as this one, and of course, this seat is currently held by Republicans, as Pat Toomey won his re-election by 1.4% in 2016. Now, yes, the polls did show Katie McGinty in the lead, so this was a surprise for the Republicans, but still, Katie McGinty did not lead by nearly the margin that John Fetterman is currently ahead by 6.6%. That is a very significant lead for the Democratic Lieutenant Governor. In fact, 538 still gives John Fetterman a 73% chance of winning this election, despite Mehmet Oz being the favorite when this forecast was first released. Now, we have seen, though, over the last few weeks that the odds for Oz have gone up just a tiny bit, but John Fetterman is still the clear favorite with a 3-4 chance at winning this race. According to the betting markets, he has a 61% chance at losing this election to John Fetterman, and the odds of Fetterman have also been going down just a little bit over the last few months, but overall, I think Democrats are going to carry this race. If John Fetterman does not win in Pennsylvania, Democrats have no chance at winning the majority for a second time, but it's a good thing that John Fetterman has always been in a pretty solid position. I do expect his numbers to go up in the next couple of weeks, and I think that he'll underperform the polls but still win by around 3 to 4%. Next up, in Vermont, Peter Welch is running for this Senate seat currently held by Patrick Leahy, but after 8 terms, Leahy will be retiring, and so the next president pro tempore will be Chuck Grassley if Republicans take back the Senate, or Dianne Feinstein if Democrats maintain the majority. So Peter Welch is currently up by 7 points in this poll. This poll is going to be absolutely incorrect. Peter Welch is going to win by at least 20%. Patrick Leahy won his last election by 28 points, and then Joe Biden won the state of Vermont in 2020 by 35 points. Vermont is the most Democratic state in the country. It is absurd that the Trafalgar Group has Malloy only behind by 7%. Just look at the latest poll for this race. Welch plus 34. I think this margin is going to be significantly more accurate. In fact, the betting markets give Welch a 97% chance at winning, the same odds that Republicans have at winning in Missouri. And then, of course, the 530 forecast gives Welch an over 99% chance at victory. So Vermont is going to be a very solid Democratic state, but according to Trafalgar's latest poll, it's only going to get the likely Democratic rating. Next up, in North Carolina, Ted Budd leads by 3%, and honestly, I think that this poll is going to underestimate Republican support. In the end, I think Sherry Beasley will lose by around 4 to 5%. North Carolina simply isn't a winnable state for Democrats this year. It was in 2020, but they still lost, as Cal Cunningham, despite leading in every single poll, did not defeat incumbent Republican Senator Thom Tillis, who defeated Kay Hagan back in 2014, and Hagan was the last Democratic senator to win a Senate election in North Carolina back in 2008. She defeated Elizabeth Dole, and ever since then, Democrats have lost every single Senate election in the state, despite trying pretty hard. I mean, they put in over $100 million in trying to elect Cal Cunningham in 2020, but after Richard Burr's 6-point win in 2016, we're probably not going to see Democrats win this seat, as right now, Ted Budd is ahead by 0.7% in the polls, and that is significant enough for him to be the heavy favorite. Polls in North Carolina almost always overestimate Democratic support, as I just said, but Sherry Beasley's numbers, I think, are still pretty impressive, considering that she should honestly be losing by 7 to 8%. These are two pretty generic Democratic and Republican candidates. Ted Budd did receive the endorsement of Donald Trump, but he is significantly more moderate than many of his other counterparts, and if you look at the most recent polls, many of them show an even race between Beasley and Budd. The betting markets actually give Budd a higher 77% chance at winning when compared to the 530 forecast, which only gives him a 69% chance at victory, making North Carolina a lean Republican state. But at this point in time, Republicans have the same chance at winning in Wisconsin, Ohio, and North Carolina. All three of these races have a 77% chance at going to the GOP, which means that these races are going to be competitive. Democrats do have a pretty significant 1 in 4 chance, but Republicans are the clear favorite, and that is the case in North Carolina as well. I honestly would not be surprised if Budd won by over 5 points, but right now, according to Trafalgar polls, it's going to be a lean Republican state. Next up, in Georgia, Herschel Walker leads by 1 point against Raphael Warnock, according to Trafalgar's latest poll. And honestly, this poll is probably going to be wrong. This poll was released over a month ago, and since then, of course, Herschel Walker's campaign has been ravaged by scandal. And even if Walker was ahead by 1 point, that is not a significant margin at all. Kelly Loeffler was supposed to win the 2021 runoff against Raphael Warnock by 1 point, but Warnock still managed a 2-point win. So Trafalgar has been known to overestimate Republicans slightly in Georgia, but overall, polls in Georgia are known for being famously accurate. The overall accurate is very close to final results, at least that's what we've seen in the last couple of years. And so Warnock has now taken a 3.9% lead in the polls after the scandals hit Herschel Walker's campaign. Basically, he is running on an entirely pro-life platform as he tries to ban abortions nationwide without any exceptions for rape or incest, while in 2009 he actually paid for an abortion for somebody that he was with at the time. And then just a couple of years later, I believe in 2012, that woman decided to have a baby after she got pregnant by Walker again, and Walker pressured her into trying to get an abortion that second time as well, but she refused, and that's basically how their relationship ended. So Herschel Walker's campaign is doing terribly right now, and that's mainly a result of the latest stories that have come out against him. I think voters in Georgia are going to re-elect Raphael Warnock to his first term in office. I mean, the betting markets have been looking very good for them in this race, as Raphael Warnock now has a 66% chance at winning. If you look at his odds just a couple of days ago, they were starting to go down, but now his odds are higher than they have ever been against Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker was a terrible nominee for the Republicans to choose. I don't know why Donald Trump endorsed him so early on. I mean, Republicans knew that Walker would have a ton of baggage, and it's really starting to come out now as we are less than a month before the midterms. 538 gives Raphael Warnock a 59% chance of winning, the highest odds for Warnock ever as well. Basically, he was behind in the very beginning, and the race got very close. Then Warnock took a very slight lead, and then now his lead is higher than it's ever been. But of course, Warnock is going to have to win by a majority, and so we're going to see whether or not that actually happens, whether or not he can crack the 50% mark, which is really going to be very, very difficult, as a runoff is still very likely. But according to the Trafalgar Group, Herschel Walker is by just 1% the favored candidate. It's now left with just 2 more races in Arizona and Ohio. So in Arizona, Mark Kelly leads by 3 points according to the Trafalgar Group against Blake Masters, and there recently was a debate for this race, and by consensus, Mark Kelly was the winner, and so he's probably going to win his re-election at this point. I really doubt the fact that Blake Masters can win. Mark Kelly leads in basically every single poll that's ever been conducted for this election, and the polls have him up on average now by 6 points. Yes, he was up by 8 points before, 10 points at one point as well, but just like John Fetterman, Mark Kelly was never going to win by 8-10%. He's going to win still by even less than 5%. Mark Kelly is going to underperform at the polls, but he's up by so much that he's still probably going to win. And so Mark Kelly won by 2.3% in 2020. That was a special election in which he defeated incumbent Republican Martha McSally, but now against Blake Masters, who is a much weaker candidate, I can see Mark Kelly winning by a larger margin, despite 2022 not being the best year for Democrats. 538 actually give Kelly an 81% chance at winning, making Arizona a likely Democratic state, and his odds have only been going up over the last couple of months. He's in a very good position to win his re-election, and I don't think Blake Masters stands a chance. He's one of the worst Republican nominees of the cycle, and I think that it's a shame for the GOP that they chose such terrible nominees in probably the 3 most important races of the year: Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. I mean, Mehmet Oz, Herschel Walker, and Blake Masters are hands down 3 of the worst Republican nominees this year, and in Ohio, they also chose J.D. Vance, who is, I think, going to be a mistake as well. So looking at the betting markets, Mark Kelly has a 62% chance at winning. He's still the clear favorite, but the odds have been tightening a little bit in the last couple of days. Arizona is still going to be competitive, still going to be a race to watch. But right now, according to Trafalgar polls, it's going to be a lean Democratic state, which does match my own personal projection. And finally, in Arizona, J.D. Vance is running an unbelievably terrible campaign. I mean, donors are pulling out. We also have voters that are losing support for Republicans here in Ohio. It's going to be one of the most competitive races of the year, despite this election being a race that should be likely for the GOP at the very least. J.D. Vance is a terrible candidate who has struggled to gain grassroots support, especially in the suburbs. Tim Ryan is a 10-term member of the House, representing one of the most competitive districts in the Buckeye State, and now he's up by 1.6% in the polls. Now, polls in Ohio are known to overestimate Democrats. They did so, of course, in 2020 and 2018 for Sherrod Brown's re-election as well, and so that's one of the main reasons why, even though Ryan leads, he's still probably not going to win. J.D. Vance has led in most of the better polls. These are polls from A-rated pollsters, but we did see recently that the first ever A-rated poll from Siena College shows Tim Ryan ahead by 3 points. We also saw a Marist College poll that had this race within the margin of error, where Vance only led by just 1%. So the election in Ohio is definitely much more competitive than it should be, and it will be one of the major races to watch this year. 538, though, still does give J.D. Vance the advantage, giving him a 7-10 chance at winning. Tim Ryan's odds have only been going up over the last few months, and I think that if things continue to go well for him, he does have a chance at winning this election. Tim Ryan is very well known in Ohio, and his favorables are much better than those for J.D. Vance. But the thing that J.D. Vance has going for him is that on the ballot, he's going to have that big R next to his name. Tim Ryan is not going to have that in a state that's shifting more and more to the right. The betting markets, as I've said before, also favor the GOP, with J.D. Vance also having a 77% chance of winning, just like Republicans do in both North Carolina and Wisconsin. So the state of Ohio, according to the latest Trafalgar Group poll, is going to be likely Republican, but honestly, I think the race is going to be closer. And so this is the 2022 Senate map based on the latest polls conducted by the Trafalgar Group, of course, the most Republican pollster in the country. They are an internal pollster for the GOP and a pollster that Donald Trump really, really likes. And so looking at their map, yes, Republicans win 51 seats, but they're probably not going to win in Georgia. I mean, it was a 1-point lead according to Trafalgar, and on top of that, this poll was conducted before any of the scandals hit Herschel Walker's campaign, and of course now Warnock has a 2-3 chance at winning this election. So the race in Georgia is probably still going to go blue, meaning, the Senate map is still looking pretty good for Democrats, even if you look at this scenario, which is probably going to be the worst possible scenario for Democrats this November. I think Ohio is also going to be close to Nevada. I think it's just going to be a tilt margin in favor of Adam Laxalt if he wins. It's still going to be very difficult to flip a seat in a state that has a partisan lean of 0, and of course to say the Democrats have been doing pretty well in the last couple of years. But the Senate map is more competitive than ever. Both parties definitely have a chance, but right now I continue to favor the Democratic Party, just like 538 does, giving them a 67% chance of winning. I don't think Democrats' odds are that high, but I do think that with the recent revelations in Georgia, Democrats are in a very good position as the month of October is almost halfway over.